Transhumanism's roots in theology. I'd like to introduce something this way. The way I see it, the original rebellion took place as recorded in Isaiah 14 when the then loyal cherub thought, I will be like the Most High. And then the original temptation was in Genesis 3 where he takes this concept and he introduces it to Eve. You will be as God. Okay, and in the same chapter there's the original deception where he says, you will not surely die. And also therein we find that Eve saw that it was, quote, a tree to be desired to make one wise. She took of the fruit thereof and did eat. But now, what wisdom was to be gained from the fruit if good was already known? So what could have been gained? Evil. The knowledge of good and evil. Also, I was not at all surprised to find out that there's a Mormon transhuman association. And I thought, well, yeah, I mean, they already believe they're going to become gods, so that's really, that writes itself. As far as the roots in occultism, okay, recall the Eve's statement that she saw it was a tree desirable to make one wise. And here I think it's important to point out that virtually every single occult group, witchcraft coven, mystery religion, secret society, call it what you will, they hold to a certain basic concept as their premise. And it's very nicely encapsulated in what's known as Christian Gnosticism, which I think is a misnomer, but there it is. So the concept is that spirit is absolutely pure, and the material realm, and of course flesh, is corrupt, right? So the one true God could not have possibly created the material realm. So the concept is that one of the lower gods created the material realm, and this God is deluded enough and arrogant enough to then claim to his creation in this corrupt little realm that, well, I am the one true God. Okay, so that's the God of the Bible in this view. And so he places humanity in this little playground, the Garden of Eden. And along comes Satan, who now becomes the good guy because he's the one that brings wisdom. He's the one that liberates them from this delusional and arrogant God. And so this is very nicely illustrated in the Greek myth of Prometheus, right? The Titan who steals fire from the gods and gives it to humanity. Now, humanity thinks, wow, this is wonderful. I mean, this is a great technology to have fire. But the fact is, he did it against Zeus's will. And the issue is that the fire is literally symbolic. Is that a thing, literally symbolic? Okay. It's symbolic of enlightenment. That's the point. I mean, that's why I said it's literally enlightenment, because the fire enlightens, but it's symbolic of the wisdom. So that's the concept behind all these occult groups, and that's why, by the way, they hate Christianity so much, because they believe that we're the ones actually worshiping this deluded and arrogant God, where they see Satan as the good guy. You see how it's, everything Satan does is a corrupted copy of what God does, but upside down, backwards, and inside out. Yes?
You said earlier, if I heard you right, the spirit, pure spirit being is good, and the material stuff like flesh is bad. But is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is either Satan or this lesser God, is that something other than spirit? I mean, if it's spirit, then it's got to be good, right? If it's good, presumably, by the previous thought, it can't create flesh.
Right. Yeah, that's the point, is this lower spirit God became corrupted, arrogant, and deluded, and Satan is still spirit, so he's pure, and that's why he comes and liberates humanity.
So in their view, Satan is pure spirit.
Right, yes, yeah, exactly. Okay, now I thought I would like to present to you from their own, this is just kind of something I found interesting, the first Apple computer sold for 666.66. Bite the apple and think different. And one of the founders said Adam and Eve didn't have anything to do with, the apple, which of course is not biblical, but people take the apple to be symbolic of the fruit. But their ad campaign sure says differently. I wanted to have you hear from their own mouth something from a real occultist, so I thought, who could I get him that's really scary, maybe Aleister Crowley or maybe Anton LaVey. But I decided to go with the actor Will Smith.
I don't want to be an icon. I want to be an idea. I want to represent an idea. I want to represent possibilities. I want to represent magic, right? That you're in a universe and 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 only equals 4 if you accept that 2 + 2 = 4. 2 + 2 is going to be what I want it to be. And there's a redemptive power that making a choice has, rather than feeling like you're at effect to all the things that are happening. Make a choice. Like, you just decide what it's going to be, who you're going to be, how you're going to do it. Just decide. And then from that point, the universe is going to get out your way. It's water. It wants to move and go around stuff, So for me, I want to represent possibilities. I want to represent the idea that you really can make what you want. One of my favorite books is The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho. And I just believe that. I believe that I can create whatever I want to create. If I can put my head on it right, study it, learn the patterns, and, it's hard to put into words. It's real metaphysical, esoteric nonsense. But I feel very strongly that we are who we choose to be.
First of all, it's not mumbo jumbo. It makes sense, number one.
I consider myself an alchemist. An alchemist is basically a mystical chemist, right? And one of the great feats that alchemists used to do is they would take lead, just take a chunk of lead, and they could turn lead into gold, right? So the symbolism...
I'm with you on the alchemy part.
That we are going to bend the universe and command and demand that the universe become what we want it to be.
That's just an example of this mindset, okay, that I can impose my will and the universe will bend to my will. It's just an example. Now note that in Genesis 1, God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And in Genesis 2, of course, it gives us the details about how that came about, which is removing the rib from Adam to make Eve. In the book, The Secret Doctrine of the Rosicrucians, Magus Incognito wrote, maybe a pseudonym, by the way, that his parent named him Magus Incognito. He notes that the tradition that mankind was anciently hermaphrodite is world old. In The Secret Teaching of All Ages, the primary Freemasonic philosopher Manly P. Hall wrote that man was primarily androgynous, is quite universally conceded, and it is a reasonable presumption that he will ultimately regain his bisexual state. Albert Pike wrote the following in Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. The doctrine of Ocellus, who was a 5th century BC Pythagorean philosopher, was the general doctrine everywhere, it naturally occurring to all to make the same distinction. The Egyptians did so in selecting those animals in which they recognized these emblematic qualities in order to symbolize the double sex of the universe. So notice on your left, that's Baphomet, you'll notice the Promethean torch on his head. Okay? And the middle one, I censored it just in case for sensibility's sakes, but believe me, that being has 2 schmeckles. In Intermediate Types Among the Primitive Folk, Edward Carpenter wrote, "It is evident that the conception of a double sex or of a sex combining the characters of male and female haunted the minds of the early peoples." And I found this interesting. In the Ante-Nicene Fathers, there's a section called Gentile Cosmogony, and it talks about the gods of the Gentiles. And it states, "The ridiculous legends concerning their origins, both that you may not be acquainted with the falsehood of this vain superstition, and that the hearers who are present may know the disgraceful character of the errors. The wise men, then, who are among the Gentiles, say that first of all things was chaos. First of all things was chaos, solidifying into the form of a huge egg. That huge egg being broken, there came forth a certain kind of man of double sex, which they call masculo-feminine." Okay, so you see how the concept of God creating both male and female in his own image, and the fact that he took the female out of the man is then corrupted in these cultures. And so they see that originally there was one being that was both. Okay, that's the concept. And the point of the transhumanists, the point of the modern day transgendered people is, well, why should I be forced, if I'm a man, to undergo a surgical procedure to make me a female, or vice versa? Why am I being made to choose one, okay? The point is this: there's what's known as the gender binary, right? There's male or female. But why is that? Well, because millions of years ago, there was just some mutation, some Darwinian survival mechanism, something just happened all by itself, completely arbitrary, unplanned, unguided, undesigned, and it just happens to have resulted in the fact that human beings are either male or female. But now, why should I be in bondage to that? Why should I be forced to be either a male or a female? You get the point of post-genderism, is why can't I be both? Or why can't I, through technology, invent some brand new gender? You see the point? The complete deconstruction of gender and humanity, and made it in our own image. Whatever that image, whatever you want that image to be, this is what transhumanism is offering to you. And so, in a paper titled Post-Genderism Beyond the Gender Binary, George Dorsky and James Hughes write, "Efforts to treat female depression and male aggression, autism, and ADD would give us ways to make the brain more androgynous." Francis Fukuyama lamented these trends, the masculizing of depressive women, women's moods by antidepressants, and the feminizing of ADD boys with stimulant medication. In Our Post-Human Future, asserting that these were the results of pressure to conform to a quote-unquote androgynous medium personality in American society. And when asked for details, they referred to pseudoestrogens and endocrine disruptors, specifically phthalates from plastics. Okay, now when I was a kid, we drank out of glasses. The liquid we drank came in glass bottles. We ate off of ceramic plates with metal silverware. I remember when we moved to this country, we were at a kids' party, and my parents look how they clean up. And the person just kind of swept their arm across the table because it was paper plates and paper napkins and plastic cups and plasticware, and it was just, they just throw everything away. You know, we were like, what a country. We were just fascinated because it was so different. And so today, you drink out of plastic cups, liquid out of plastic bottles, plastic Tupperware, plastics all around. So their point is what I'll explain this way. Okay, so you have a boy whose body is starting to develop, literally building from chemicals the body of a man, with the mind of a man, and the musculature of a man, and the desires of a man. but his system's being flooded with estrogen, okay, and vice versa for the girl. She's trying to develop, the body's building into a body of a woman with the desires and mind of a woman, but she's being flooded with testosterone, so that their bodies are literally conflicted and confused. So we end up with kids that they don't know anymore. They just, what, am I homosexual, am I bisexual? I'm kind of just androgynous. I have this kind of blob of a body. It's, that's the way it's getting. And these guys are pointing out that it's being done through chemicals. And I mean, it was so stunning to me how they say that the efforts to treat, right, these disorders would give us ways to make the brain more androgynous. Right, so they're using these technologies to literally deconstruct humanity. So next in the roots in occultism, it's very important to discuss the golem. Okay, golem really just means unformed substance or something rolled together. Sometimes it's used to refer to a fetus. And within the context of the golem, you have to talk about the Kabbalah, but I want to get there by means of a circumlocution. Okay, so with man-made tradition, there's always a desire to appeal to an authority that's ancient and say it really comes from way, way back then, and that gives us the authority. Okay, so for instance, in Islam, you have the written Quran, but then you have the Hadith and the Sunnah, and that's the oral tradition of the doings and sayings of Muhammad. Okay, in Catholicism, you have the written Bible, but then you have the oral tradition passed down through the apostles, and of course, the sayings of popes and saints and apparitions. Well, likewise, in rabbinic Judaism, you have the written Tanakh, but then you also have the Mishnah. Okay, the Mishnah is said to be that when Moses was up on Sinai, God gave him the Torah to write down, the Pentateuch. But then he gave him a set of oral teachings that he was supposed to pass down orally, and that's the Mishnah. Well, eventually, commentary was made upon the Mishnah, and that's the Gemara. And so finally, when you combine the Mishnah and the Gemara, and it was codified and put into writing, that's the Talmudim. Because there's two Talmud. There's the Talmud Yerushalmi, or the Talmud of Jerusalem, and the Talmud Bavli, which is the Babylonian Talmud, which is definitely the more voluminous and authoritative. So now finally the Kabbalists come along and say, when Moses was up on Sinai, he not only was given revelation to write down in the Torah, also given oral tradition, but he was also given a mystical set of teachings that he was also just supposed to pass down orally. I tell you, Moshe was busy up there. I mean, no wonder his face was glowing. His head was ready to explode. And so we end up with Kabbalah, which was really formalized in the 1200s AD. And it really is at the heart of virtually every occult group you could think of. There's Kabbalah, which has been described as everything from Jewish logic to mysticism to witchcraft. It's been defined in so many different ways. But note that the Jewish Tribune of New York for October 28, 1927 wrote, "Masonry is based on Judaism. Eliminate the teachings of Judaism from the Masonic ritual and what is left." There's a compilation of papers written by Aleister Crowley titled 777 and Other Kabbalistic Writings. And the Jewish Encyclopedia notes that the idea of the creative power of numbers and letters upon which the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Creation, is founded, seems to have originated in Chaldea, which is southern Babylon or modern Iraq. And the Sansino publication of the Babylonian Talmud notes that the Book of Creation has affinities with Babylonian, Egyptian, and Hellenistic mysticism. So now, the Kabbalistic idea of the golem really comes out of Genesis 2, which states, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and he became a living soul." And that's the concept of the golem, that through enough training, a rabbi could mold a humanoid form out of dirt and do the same thing that God did. You will be as God, right? That's the same exact point. But within our context, the golem is really a programmed organic computer because it has no volition of its own, okay? And so through whatever magical rites, and there's various different stories about how it would actually happen, like some say the rabbi would put the tetragrammaton on the forehead, or else the emet, which is a name for God, right? The aleph, mem, and tav, the first, middle, and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Emet means truth, and God is the beginning, middle, and the end. And that would bring the golem to life, and then when the rabbi was done with it, it would erase the aleph, and then it would just say met, and met means death, so it would just deteriorate. And I'm certainly not the only one to correlate the concept of the Kabbalistic golem with transhumanism. There's a book from MIT, God and Golem Inc., a comment on certain points where cybernetics impinges on religion, and University of Chicago and Cambridge University presses, not exactly purveyors of conspiracy theories, Dr. Golem, How to Think About Medicine, and Golem at Large, What You Should Know About Technology. Now, note that the 2003 Transhumanist Frequently Asked Questions states that transhumanists seek to make their dreams come true in this world by relying not on supernatural powers or divine intervention, but on rational thinking and empiricism through continued scientific, technological, economic, and human developments. Some of the prospects that used to be the exclusive thunder of the religious institutions, such as a very long lifespan, unfading bliss, and godlike intelligence, are being discussed by transhumanists as hypothetical future engineering achievements. And the World Transhumanist Association answered the question, what are the philosophical and cultural antecedents of transhumanism? And here's what they say, in part. That people really strove to live longer and richer lives can also be seen in the development of systems of magic and alchemy. Lacking scientific means of producing an elixir of life, one resorts to magical means. So, I mean, it's right there in the open. It's not like I'm making this stuff up because I'm a Christian and I think they're bad guys. Now, James Hughes, George Drovsky, and Michael Torra wrote, the three of us are launching the Institute for Ethics and Engineering Technologies Cyber Buddha project to combine our efforts and promote discussion of the impact that neuroscience and emergent neurotechnologies will have on happiness, spirituality, cognitive liberty, moral behavior, and the exploration of meditational and ecstatic states of mind. And the Babylonian Talmud at Sanhedrin 65a actually states that Rabbah said, if the righteous desire it, they could be creators. Rabbi Hanina and Rabbi Oshaya spent every Saturday Eve studying the book of creation, by means of which they created a third grown calf and ate it. So I said the golem is basically an organic computer, and it's because, well, one of the stories I really enjoyed about the golem is a rabbi sent his golem off to go fishing, and by nightfall he hasn't returned, so he sends somebody to go get it. He says, the rabbi wants you to come home. The golem stands up, throws the basket full of fish in the river, and goes back home. Right? Because you didn't tell him, pick up the basket of fish and bring it with you back to the house. You see, it's just like they used to say about programming, garbage in, garbage out. It has no volition. It only does precisely what it's told. It's literally an organic computer. And it reminded me of being at my friend's house, and he's in the bathroom. He says, Mariano, come in here. I was like, no. But he says, look at this. I told my son to bring toilet paper from upstairs. He just set it down on the counter, and I said, hey, you didn't say take off the old roll, throw it in the garbage can, put the new one in, and reattach it to the wall. You didn't say that. You said to bring toilet paper down, and that's what he did, right? So I guess the golem's just a teenager. Now note also that Hebrews 2 refers to they, quote, who through the fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. And so the fear of death equals fear of judgment, of course. And I ran across this little cartoon here by Matt Groening. It's an ongoing series he used to do about two Freemasonic Shriners, Akbar and Jeff, and here they built the cryonics hut. And notice the line here, the motto, where the elite beat the heat and avoid having to meet St. Pete. Okay, and that's really deep if you think about it. It's this concept of life extension to avoid death, to avoid judgment. Now, I thought that I really should include a word or two about the mark of the beast, which I honestly think generally way too much is made from it. Because the fact is, the mark is part of a tripartite system. So Revelation 13 states, refers to they who receive the mark on their right hand or in their forehead, that no man might buy or sell save they had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Okay, so there's more to that scenario than a mark. Remember the tripartite. And I don't really know. I wonder if it has something to do with juxtaposing it to what Revelation 9 refers to as those men which have not had the seal of God in their foreheads. It's almost like there's a juxtaposition. And it is different Greek words, so maybe there's nothing there. But I wonder if there's a distinction there between the seal of God over here, the mark of the beast over here. Now, also just be careful about your interpretation of what the mark of the beast is, because your interpretation today is not the interpretation that it was 100 years ago, much less 1,000 or 2,000 years ago, and it's not what it'll be 100 years from now and 1,000 years from now. So for instance, today, the hot interpretation is that it's a microchip, an RFID chip or something like that. But even that is becoming obsolete technology, so you're going to have to change your interpretation. Now you're going to have to talk about nanobots. And anyone recognize these guys? It's from the end of the movie AI. You guys recall that? Okay, anyone know what these guys are?
Some kind of androids.
That's right. A lot of people think they were supposed to be aliens, but they're not. They're futuristic, silicon-based AI. Okay, so now, to modernize your pop interpretation of the mark, you're going to have to talk about nanobots and silicon-based technology, no longer a computer chip. So just to keep that in mind. This was what I call my cyborg experience. Because, I couldn't even afford to stand next to a car like this, but went up to Denver last year to give a talk, and I got to rent a car, the cheapest one I could find, because I don't care. I'm not a car guy. And so the confirmation email said Hyundai something, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. They ended up giving me this thing, a 2015 Mustang.
GT Mustang.
He was my co-pilot, by the way. And I'm actually glad I don't own a car like this, because it's very conducive, shall we say. But I realized essentially this is a robotic body, and I was the brain inside of it operating it. Now, with this robotic body, I could travel a lot further and a lot faster. A lot faster. I won't even mention that you got a speeding ticket when you slowed down to 120.
125.
And so it's climate controlled. It has the technology for GPS and telephone and all this stuff. And that's what it left me thinking, is this is basically a robot. And it gives you the sense that you could really, you really could do a lot more. You could accomplish a lot more. I mean, I'm thinking, I wonder if I could pass people going uphill. Yes, oh, this is wonderful, you know. And now, if I was, malicious, let's say, I could definitely get in a lot of trouble with this, right? I could race people. I could, hey, buddy, look at this finger, and I could just take off. They'd never catch me. All kinds of things, because you got this sense of, I'm more than just a human being now. I have this extremely powerful vehicle, and believe me, if you went the speed limit, the RPMs were like, you got to be kidding me, buddy. Let's go. I mean, it was, yeah, it was incredible. So, with that in mind,
we are going to become gods. Period. If you don't like it, get off. You don't have to contribute. You don't have to participate. And if you're going to interfere with me becoming God, you're going to have big trouble. And we'll have warfare. The only way you can prevent me is to kill me. And you kill me, I'll kill you.
I mean, imagine you're a Terran and your next door neighbor starts going cyborgian, right? Starts adding components, and then suddenly the person next door is capable of learning a human language in just by, in seconds. So you would then get a real split in human capacities, because these cyborgs are no longer human in effect. So if humanity starts building intellects, isn't that just going to diminish human importance even more? We as human beings, we're part of the universe. And now, because of our intelligence that's evolved over billions of years, we are now on the point of making a major transition away from biology to this new step. And if you are a cosmist, you could argue that the cosmic process may be part of that longer term goal. Maybe humanity is just a stepping stone. Human beings already, theorists, have done the math. They've got the modeling of how to build baby universes. So if that's possible in theory, with human brains doing the thinking, what could an intellect do? Could it actually build universes? Could it actually manipulate whatever exists to create new universes? Is that possible? Now, if it can do that, then by definition, it's a god, right? It's a creator.